The studio lights glimmered like stars as cameras rolled and the crowd cheered. It was supposed to be just another night on a top-rated talk show. Laughter, questions, and harmless jokes. But no one knew this episode would be remembered for a very different reason. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, longtime friends and beloved Hollywood icons, entered the stage together. Their smiles were gentle, unforced, the kind that spoke of grace and humility earned through years of pain and perseverance. The audience welcomed them with applause that shook the studio walls. But behind that glowing welcome, the host had something else in mind. Known for his edgy humor and viral moments, he whispered to his producer before the show, "Let's make this one unforgettable. I'll push them a little. See how they react." As the applause faded, the host leaned forward with a grin that was more cunning than kind. "So Keanu," he began, "still doing those action movies? You ever get tired of playing the same sad guy who barely talks?" The crowd chuckled nervously. Keanu smiled politely, answering with his usual calm tone, "I just try to tell stories that connect with people." Unimpressed, the host turned to Sandra. "And Sandra, you've been around for a while too. Still waiting for that next big hit?" A few uneasy laughs rippled through the room. Sandra smiled, but her eyes flickered with discomfort. She tried to lighten the mood. "I think I'm just happy doing what I love." But the host wasn't done. He leaned back, smirking. "You two ever wonder if Hollywood's just moved on?" The words hung in the air like a bad smell. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a glance, a quiet understanding between two people who had faced far worse in life than one man's arrogance. Keanu kept his composure, his calm presence almost unsettling in contrast to the host's loud energy. Sandra rested her hand near his arm, steadying herself. No one could predict what would happen next, but what Keanu did in that moment would silence the entire room. What Keanu did next made the entire studio go silent. The host leaned forward, sensing the tension he'd created, and for some reason he liked it. The cameras caught every twitch of his smirk as he said, "Come on, Keanu, lighten up. It's just a joke. You look like you've forgotten how to smile since The Matrix." The crowd let out a few forced chuckles, unsure whether they were supposed to laugh or feel uncomfortable. Keanu smiled faintly, that same peaceful expression he always carried, neither defensive nor angry. He replied softly, "I smile when there's a reason to, not when someone tells me to." A subtle shift rippled through the room. Some audience members began to clap, but the host quickly interrupted with a loud laugh. "Oh, deep words from Mr. Wick himself. I bet you practice that in the mirror every morning, huh?" Sandra's face changed. Her smile faded as she glanced toward the crowd, sensing the growing awkwardness. She interjected gently, "You know, Keanu doesn't need to act deep, he just is. That's why people love him." Her tone was calm but firm. The host didn't like it. "Oh, so you're his spokesperson now?" he snapped. "What's next? A charity speech?" The crowd went silent. The laughter was gone. Even the band stopped playing softly in the background. The atmosphere had shifted. No longer entertainment, but humiliation. Keanu turned toward Sandra with a calm nod, then looked back at the host. "You can make fun of me," he said slowly, "but don't talk to her that way." His voice was quiet, but the firmness in it cut through the room like a blade. The audience gasped, not out of shock, but out of respect. The host blinked, caught off guard. He forced a grin and leaned toward Keanu again, trying to regain control. "Hey, don't take it so seriously, man. It's all fun and games. You Hollywood types are too sensitive." Sandra shook her head slightly, whispering, "This isn't fun. It's disrespect." Keanu looked around the audience, my rows of people staring. Phones raised, recording the tension building live on camera. And then with calm authority he said, "Respect isn't something that comes with fame. It's something you show because we're all human, that's all." For the first time that night, the host had no comeback. His smile faded, and the crowd began to applaud, slowly, then louder, echoing through the entire studio. Sandra leaned closer, whispering to Keanu, "Let's just leave." Keanu shook his head gently. "No," he murmured. "I've done nothing wrong." The host looked around nervously, realizing he was losing control of his own show. And as the applause died down, one thing became clear. This was no longer a talk show. It was a lesson unfolding live on air. Have you ever seen someone disrespected on live TV? What would you have done if you were in Keanu's place? Let us know in the comments. Also, where are you watching from? Drop your city and country below. The studio was no longer laughing. The lights felt harsher now, the air heavier. Even the host's usual arrogance began to crack under the weight of his own words. But he wasn't done yet. Desperate to win back the crowd, he smirked and said, all right, calm down, everyone. Let's not get too serious. I just didn't realize St. Keanu was so touchy. A few people chuckled out of habit, but the laughter died quickly. Sandra crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. The tension in the room could be felt, pulsing through every camera lens, every heartbeat in the audience. Keanu didn't flinch. His stillness was powerful, the kind of silence that demanded respect without a single word. But the host, sensing the silence as weakness, leaned in closer. You know, he said, lowering his voice. People say your calm attitude comes from losing too much. Maybe that's what happens when tragedy follows you everywhere, huh? The audience gasped. A woman in the front row whispered, did he really just say that? Keanu's eyes shifted, not angry but piercing. The kind of look that freezes time. Sandra's hand slowly reached for his arm, worried.
Keanu,
she whispered, her voice trembling. The host realized too late that he'd crossed a sacred line. The control he thought he had vanished in an instant. The crowd began to murmur, the once playful atmosphere now thick with disbelief. Keanu took a slow breath, the kind that comes before truth. He looked straight at the host and said softly, you don't need to understand my pain. But you should understand one thing. Mocking someone's wounds doesn't make you brave. It only shows how lost you are. His words hit like thunder, quiet but unstoppable. The entire audience fell silent. Even the cameras stopped moving, capturing that moment of absolute stillness. Sandra's eyes glistened with pride as she whispered, that's the Keanu I know. The host tried to recover, fumbling with his cue cards. Hey man, I was just joking around. Keanu interrupted, not with anger but calm finality. Then maybe the joke's not as funny as you think. The audience erupted, a standing ovation that lasted longer than any applause the show had seen. Some shouted his name, others simply clapped through tears. Even the band started playing softly, trying to ease the atmosphere that Keanu's words had carved into the room. The host sat frozen, realizing that in trying to humiliate a man, he had only exposed himself. Sandra turned to the crowd, her voice filled with grace. You know, she said softly, sometimes silence speaks louder than any insult ever could. The cameras zoomed in on Keanu, quiet, steady, unshaken. His eyes weren't filled with revenge, but with something far more powerful, peace. And for everyone watching in that single moment, the meaning of dignity changed forever. If you were sitting in that audience, would you have spoken up or stayed silent? Tell us in the comments below. The studio stood frozen in silence, hundreds of eyes fixed on Keanu Reeves, the man who had just dismantled arrogance with nothing but calm truth. The host shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his rehearsed smile now replaced by nervous blinking. Cameras zoomed in on his uneasy face, but the real story was happening in the audience. From the back row, a young fan whispered to her friend, wait, is he really that calm? That's Keanu Reeves, man. He's been through hell and still treats people with kindness. The friend frowned. Yeah, I know, but why is the host treating him like that? Soon, murmurs spread through the audience like ripples in water. That's John Wick, the guy who lost his best friend and still stayed humble. He's not just an actor, he's the most down-to-earth celebrity in Hollywood. One teenager even pulled out his phone, showing a clip to others, a video of Keanu giving up his subway seat for a stranger, another of him quietly donating millions to children's hospitals. The whispers turned to outrage. Meanwhile, on stage, Keanu sat quietly, his hands folded, completely unaware that the tide was turning behind him. Sandra leaned toward him, speaking softly so the microphones barely caught it. You've handled this perfectly, she said. You didn't need to prove anything. They're starting to see it for themselves. He gave her a faint smile. Humble, gentle, the kind that only someone truly grounded could offer. But the host, clearly embarrassed, tried to claw his way back into control. All right, let's move on, he said quickly, laughing awkwardly. I think we've all gotten a little too emotional here. He forced a chuckle, hoping the audience would follow. They didn't. Instead, a woman in the front row called out, Show him some respect. The host froze. Someone else shouted, "You don't talk to Keanu like that." Another voice, "He's a better man than you'll ever be." The room erupted, not in chaos but in awakening. The crowd had found its voice. Sandra's eyes welled up, not from sadness but from pride. She knew how rare it was for people to see beyond the fame, to recognize the human being beneath the legend. Keanu turned slightly, looking toward the audience. His expression didn't change, no smugness, no triumph, just quiet gratitude. He raised a hand, gesturing for calm. "It's all right," he said softly. "We're all here to share a moment, not to fight one." His humility disarmed everyone instantly. The same crowd that had been roaring moments earlier now listened in complete silence, hanging on his every word. Even the host looked stunned. How could someone stay so composed, so gracious after being insulted on national television? Keanu continued, his tone gentle but profound. "Everyone makes mistakes. Sometimes words hurt more than we realize, but the way we respond, that's what defines us." Sandra reached over and held his hand in a simple gesture that said everything. The audience applauded again, this time not out of pity but out of genuine admiration. Up in the control room, producers exchanged looks. "What's happening?" one whispered. Another replied, "This isn't a talk show anymore. It's a lesson in humanity." And as the applause thundered through the studio once again, something deeper spread far beyond those walls. A reminder that kindness, even in the face of humiliation, carries more power than any fame or fortune ever could. But when the host went too far one last time, Keanu's final words would leave the world speechless. The applause slowly faded, leaving behind an echo of emotion that hung in the studio air. The host sat there, visibly shaken, shuffling his cue cards with trembling hands. His rehearsed charm was gone, replaced by something closer to fear. He glanced nervously toward the camera, then forced another smirk. "Well, this got deep fast," he joked weakly, hoping to break the tension. "I guess we're all getting a little too sensitive these days, huh?" The audience didn't laugh. Not one person. Sandra stared at him, disbelief written across her face. "You call respect being sensitive?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with disappointment more than anger. The host tried to deflect, waving his hand dismissively. "Come on, Sandra, it's a talk show. We're supposed to have fun here. It's all part of the entertainment." Keanu finally looked up. His calm eyes met the host's with quiet strength, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't threaten, but commands. "Fun?" he repeated softly. "Is it fun when someone uses pain as a punchline?" The host blinked, caught off guard again. He tried to respond, but no words came out. The studio was so silent that even the cameras seemed to hum louder than usual. Keanu continued, his voice calm, yet carrying weight. "You see, laughter is powerful. It can bring people together, or it can tear someone apart. The choice is always yours." Sandra placed a hand on his shoulder, steady but proud. The host chuckled awkwardly, still trying to hold on to the show. "Hey, I didn't mean to offend anyone. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Then maybe think before you speak. Because sometimes the words we say out of carelessness are the ones that echo longest." That was it. The studio exploded with applause. People stood up, clapping with raw emotion. Some shouted, "Bravo!" Others just wiped tears from their eyes. The host looked around, realizing the moment had escaped his control completely. He had come to make two guests look foolish, but it was his own arrogance that had been stripped bare for the world to see. Keanu didn't gloat. He simply sat back, silent, while the applause thundered. His expression wasn't triumphant. It was peaceful, almost compassionate, as if he was more sorry for the host than angry with him. Sandra turned to the audience, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "You see what just happened here?" she said. "That's what strength really looks like. It's not shouting louder. It's staying calm when the world tries to shake you." The audience roared again, not for fame, not for the stars sitting on stage, but for the message they had just witnessed. The host sat still, swallowing hard, unable to meet Keanu's eyes. He tried to move on with the show, fumbling for another question, but Keanu stopped him gently. "I don't want to talk about movies," Keanu said softly. "Let's talk about something more important." The host hesitated. "Like what?" "Respect," Keanu replied simply. "We live in a time where kindness is treated like weakness. But I've learned, kindness is what keeps the world from falling apart." His words hit deep. Sandra nodded, her eyes glistening. "That's why we're still here," she said. "Because people need to be reminded that grace is power." The camera zoomed in on Keanu's face, and calm, sincere, and real. He wasn't performing. He wasn't acting. He was teaching, and in that instant, even the host seemed to understand. His head lowered slightly, not because he was told to, but because somewhere deep inside he finally felt ashamed. The applause swelled again, rising like a wave that refused to end. Keanu and Sandra looked at each other, exchanging a small, knowing smile, the kind that said everything without a single word. And as the lights shimmered above them, the entire studio and everyone watching from home knew they had just witnessed something far greater than an interview. They had witnessed dignity win, but just when everyone thought it was over, another guest stepped on stage, and what happened next would flip the story completely. The studio was still buzzing from Keanu's words, that kind of stunned silence mixed with awe, where everyone's too moved to speak. The host fidgeted with his notes, sweat visible under the bright studio lights. He tried to regain his rhythm, but it was gone. The show was no longer his. It now belonged to the moment. Then, from behind the stage curtains, a producer rushed out with a panicked expression, whispering urgently into the host's earpiece. The host's face went pale. His forced smile collapsed as he muttered under his breath, "You're kidding." The producer didn't respond. He simply nodded toward the control booth. A second guest had just arrived, an unannounced surprise. It was a retired sports legend invited for the next segment. He walked in confidently, shaking Keanu's hand immediately. "It's an honor, man. I've followed your career for years," he said warmly. The audience applauded again, sensing the shift. The host forced a laugh, trying to act natural. "Oh, so you two know each other?" The athlete nodded. Everyone knows Keanu. The man's a global icon, not just for his movies, but for who he is. That line hit the host like a punch. His eyes darted nervously toward the crowd, realizing that everyone was now watching him, not with amusement, but judgment. The athlete continued, turning toward the audience. "You know, I've met a lot of famous people. Most of them forget what it means to be human. But this guy," he pointed to Keanu, "he never does." The crowd erupted once more. Sandra smiled softly, whispering to Keanu, "It's finally turning around." The host tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "Well, I think I might have misjudged the tone a little earlier." Keanu looked at him, not with anger, not even disappointment, just quiet compassion. "It happens," he said calmly. "We all say things we don't mean sometimes. What matters is if we learn from them." The host swallowed hard. You're right. I went too far." The moment felt raw, almost surreal. The host, once cocky and in control, now looked small beneath the weight of his own behavior. His eyes glistened as he said softly, "I'm sorry, Keanu." Keanu nodded with the same grace that had defined him throughout the night. "Apology accepted," he smiled gently. "We all fall short sometimes. I've made mistakes too." That one sentence, humble, honest, melted the tension completely. The audience clapped again, louder than ever. Even the cameraman joined in. Sandra leaned forward with emotion in her voice. "You see, that's the power of humility. It turns conflict into understanding." The athlete nodded. "And it takes a real man to forgive, especially when the whole world's watching." Keanu looked toward the audience, his voice steady but filled with warmth. "I'm not here to prove anyone wrong," he said. "I just hope moments like this remind us all, never to judge people by how they look, how famous they are, or what we think we know about them. Everyone's fighting a battle you can't see." The studio was silent again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. The host's shoulders dropped, his arrogance finally replaced by genuine remorse. "You've taught me something tonight, Keanu," he said quietly. "Something my show never has before." Keanu smiled, that humble, almost shy smile he's known for. "Then it was worth being here." The crowd rose to their feet. Cameras panned over tearful faces. Sandra squeezed Keanu's hand proudly, whispering, "You didn't just win the audience, you changed them." And as the music swelled and the show neared its end, one truth became undeniable. In a world that rewards arrogance, kindness had just taken the spotlight. Do you think the host deserved forgiveness after how he treated Keanu? Or should actions have consequences? Share your thoughts in the comments below. By the next morning, the world had changed. Clips from the talk show were everywhere. TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Millions of people replayed that single moment when Keanu Reeves silenced arrogance with humility. The headlines were explosive. Keanu Reeves teaches a lesson in grace, live on TV. Rude host gets humbled by Hollywood's kindest star. Sandra Bullock and Keanu's classy response wins the internet. Within hours, the video had over 50 million views, and every comment echoed the same sentiment. This is how you handle disrespect. Fans from around the world began sharing stories of Keanu's real-life kindness. The time he gave up his seat for a stranger on the subway, quietly donated to children's hospitals, or stayed behind to help film crews pack up late at night. For many, this interview wasn't just another celebrity clip. It was a reminder of what true decency looks like. Meanwhile, inside the network's studio, chaos erupted. Producers received hundreds of messages, some furious, others emotional. The host, once known for his snarky humor, faced a wave of backlash unlike anything before. Viewers demanded accountability. Sponsors threatened to pull out. The show's reputation was at stake. But amid the storm, something unexpected happened. The host went live on social media that evening, looking nothing like his usual self. His voice trembled as he said, "I crossed a line last night. I disrespected a man who spent his life showing compassion. Keanu, Sandra, to you both, I'm deeply sorry." The apology went viral too. And once again, Keanu's response was pure grace. He posted a simple message on his page. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It reminds us that everyone deserves a chance to do better. That single line broke the internet, shared by celebrities, teachers, parents, and even children. People wrote in the comments, "This is what the world needs more of." Sandra joined him in a joint interview days later, her eyes filled with warmth. "You know," she said, "it wasn't about embarrassing anyone. It was about reminding people that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength." Keanu nodded beside her. Fame fades. Looks fade. But how you treat people, that's the part that never goes away. The clip was shown in classrooms, leadership seminars, even churches. A modern parable about humility and respect. Memes turned into motivational posters. Hashtags like "Be Like Keanu" and "Respect Over Fame" trended for weeks, but the story didn't end there. A month later, the same host invited Keanu and Sandra back on his show, this time for a special episode titled Redemption and Respect. The studio looked different now, softer lights, calmer energy. The host began with tears in his eyes, saying, "You two didn't just forgive me, you taught me what it means to be human again." Keanu simply smiled, replying, "We're all learning. Every day." As the show wrapped up, the audience rose in another standing ovation, not just for a movie star, but for the man behind the fame. The applause wasn't wild or chaotic this time. It was warm, heartfelt, healing. Outside the studio, fans held signs that read, "Kindness wins." Others simply whispered to one another, "Did you see how he handled it? That's what the world needs." Back home that night, Keanu sat by his window, city lights flickering beyond the glass. Sandra called him to say goodnight. "You did good," she said softly. Keanu chuckled. "We all did," he replied. Even him, there was a pause. "You really believe that?" she asked. "I have to," he said gently. "If we give up on people, we give up on hope." Sandra smiled through the phone. "That's why people love you, Keanu." The night was quiet again, the way he liked it. No fame, no noise, and just peace. And somewhere out there, millions of viewers rewatched that moment. The look in his eyes, the calm in his voice, the power in his silence, and realized that sometimes the loudest message isn't shouted. It's spoken through grace. If you believe the world needs more kindness, type love in the comments. And tell us, what's one moment where kindness changed your life?